New York Mayor and one-time presidential contender Rudy Giuliani created a firestorm when at a private Republican fundraiser he said this about President Obama. "I know this is a horrible thing to say, but I do not believe that the president loves America. He doesn't love you, and he doesn't love me. He wasn't brought up the way you were brought up, and I was brought up through love of this country."
Our first guest is the former United States Attorney General, former counsel to President George W. Bush, now dean at the Belmont University College of Law. Let's welcome Alberto Gonzales into MidPoint. Mr. Gonzales, a pleasure to talk to you again.
It's good to be with you.
Curious to get your reaction right away to Rudy Giuliani's statement, because quite frankly, left, right, and in between, it has created quite a storm to insist the president does not love America.
Well, let me first begin by saying that, of course, I'm a big fan of Rudy Giuliani. He's a great patriot. He stepped into the breach in 9/11 and is considered a hero by many Americans and by people around the world. I don't know this president. I don't know his values. I don't know what's important to him. I certainly don't know him like I know George W. Bush. So I would not be one to say whether or not he loves America or not. I do believe it's important, however, for the leader of this country to be unapologetic about America and American values. I mean, name a country that sacrificed more of its sons and daughters to not just defend this country, but to promote democracy around the world. And so I think that, again, I think if you're the President of the United States, you have an obligation to set forth a positive image about this country and about all the good things that we have done in the past and all the good things that we continue to do today.
Why then does he at many times go to the nth degree when it comes to being humble? Because I think there are many people who feel exactly how you feel, that he is the President of the United States, we are still the greatest country in America, and he continues in the minds of many to downplay this nation.
Well, I don't know. Again, I can't speak for President Obama. I think you really have to know him as a person. And I don't have that kind of experience, that kind of insight into him as a person in terms of how he views his role as a leader of this country is. And without knowing that information, I think that it's hard to answer that question. But it does seem to me that the positions that he's taken publicly, his statements that he's made publicly, or failed to make publicly about America and about America's place in the world, has created unnecessary controversy for him. And I think that that's very, very unfortunate when we have so many challenges facing this country, both domestically and internationally.
Well, let me ask you then to those four words, place in the world. Seeing what the world has become right now, looking at the threat from ISIS, from other terrorists, from what we are facing now, what exactly then, in your opinion, is and should be America's place in the world?
I believe that America is still the greatest country on the face of the earth. I still believe that we are a beacon of hope for everyone around the world, and that we are still an exceptional nation, and that we are still expected to lead around the world, and that when the United States does not become involved in influencing outcomes around the world, we're going to get outcomes that are not in our best interest and not in the best interest of our allies. And so I believe that we still have a very important role to play around the world. And some people have a very different opinion about America's role in the world. I happen to believe that in a world that's becoming increasingly smaller because of technology, that we can't afford to be an isolationist country. We have to be involved in shaping outcomes around the world. And I'm not suggesting that we send troops on the ground in every place, that we sacrifice American lives everywhere. But I do think that there are ways that we can play a more important role, more pivotal role to address challenges that exist outside the United States that ultimately, if left alone, will grow and fester and become problems for the United States.
About 30 seconds, and then we'll take a break, come back and talk more. But to your point there, does America need to be the world's policeman?
Well, I don't know if I would say the world's policeman. That makes me uncomfortable. But I do think that we need to be the world's leader. And what by that I mean that we provide guidance in terms of strategies to address problems, and maybe those problems can be addressed physically by other countries. But nonetheless, those countries are not going to be inclined to become involved, to sacrifice, unless we're staying there with them, unless we show encouragement, unless we provide some level of support. So in that sense, I think the United States should be viewed as the world's leader.
I hear that word leadership coming in there too. Well, you didn't say it. It came through real clear. If you would, please hold tight for a couple of moments. Short break. We return with former AG Alberto Gonzales to look at the man who currently holds his former chair. That and more when we continue right here on MidPoint. Let us welcome back to MidPoint the former Attorney General of the United States, Alberto Gonzales. And by the way, are you now referred to as Dean Gonzales?
Well, my students certainly referred to me as Dean.
I just wanted to be sure, that's all, because a man gets a title like that. A man deserves to be called that title that he earns, and you certainly earned it with all your work. Let's then talk about your work prior to then coming and becoming a dean, your work as Attorney General and what is happening right now in that chair. There's a number of people who watch as Attorney General Eric Holder is now apparently planning to file charges in Ferguson, Missouri against the police departments and go after the people there. There are some who say that the officer was found not guilty. Technically, they did not bring him up on charges. He was not indicted. So there's some people who feel that this is not in the best interests of the nation at this time to go so vociferously after Ferguson, Missouri. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I'm not in a position to say that I disagree with what the department is doing. Quite frankly, I don't know what the evidence shows, and obviously there are a lot of considerations to take into account when making a decision to charge an entire police department with respect to a pattern and practice problem. But and one of the things you do consider is whether or not, what are the circumstances and what the effect it may be, not only in that community, but in communities around the country. But let's face it, at the end of the day, the Department of Justice is charged with prosecuting violations of federal law. And if in fact there is evidence that supports a charge, then it seems to me that obviously the Attorney General is well within his right, advised by people in the Civil Rights Division, that charges should be brought in this particular case. And I don't, whether or not this is something that should be left for the new Attorney General, that's a question I think that we can debate. But again, at the end of the day, if in fact the evidence is strong and supports charges going forward, then that's the job of the Department of Justice.
Well, let's get to this, because I know you've seen it, so many people have. There are issues with law enforcement dealing with communities in this country right now. There is a national discussion that has to be had about this and what people need to do, both citizens and law enforcement. Does the Department of Justice need to take a heavier hand to start going after these police departments, to stop making them accountable and start making sure that they are indeed serving and protecting at every level?
Well, let me just say that I think that an overwhelming number of police departments around this country are doing a great job, and they're working very closely with community leaders and community groups to ensure that the kinds of problems that appear to exist in Ferguson, Missouri, don't develop in their community. So let's be very clear about that. And I think one of the criticisms I might have with respect to the Department of Justice and the way that they've dealt with Ferguson, Missouri, is not enough acknowledgement of what good police officers are doing all across this country, and too much focus on some of the perhaps negative stuff, bad stuff by a few members of law enforcement. So I think that that's something that I wish had been handled a little differently in Ferguson, Missouri.
Note, too, on Attorney General Holder, he is now endorsing a halt to all executions nationwide while the Supreme Court considers whether some lethal injection methods are unconstitutional. I guess the question here is, in your opinion, is this because the execution drugs are unsafe, or do you think this is a backdoor to trying to eventually get rid of the death penalty?
Well, General Holder is on record, I think, opposing the death penalty.
Yes, he is.
And the reason he gives is because of the possibility that an innocent person may be executed. But that fails to ignore the situations which do occur when the person admits that they committed the crime and there is strong direct evidence that they committed the crime. And so in that case, why wouldn't the death penalty be appropriate if that's what the citizens of a particular state believe is important? So in that sense, I disagree with the Attorney General. I believe in the death penalty. I advised George W. Bush through 50 federal and state executions. Obviously, in informing the chief executive about possible clemency recommendations relating to the death penalty, one of the things you study and you want to examine very carefully, what is the evidence supporting the guilt in a particular case. Whether or not this is a backdoor way to stop executions, I don't know. Obviously, there's been some issues with some state executions, Oklahoma being a prime example. I happen to believe that for many people in this country, they do believe that the death penalty it is appropriate in certain cases. The Supreme Court has held that it is constitutional under certain circumstances, and I, for one, would continue to support the application of the death penalty so long as we're doing everything that we can to ensure that it's only the guilty that are being punished.
Just 15 seconds left here. Do you personally believe the death penalty is a deterrent to crime?
I'm not sure that it is a deterrent to crime with respect to certain actors. For me, that's not the reason I support the death penalty. I just believe that it is the appropriate punishment. It's the appropriate way to hold people accountable for certain kinds of crimes. But I think for some certain individuals, unfortunately, they are such an evil nature that the possibility of the death penalty would not really serve as a deterrent. It may be a deterrent in certain cases, but from my perspective, that's not why I support the death penalty.
Former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, let me say Dean Gonzales. We thank you so much for taking a couple of minutes to join us. I'll look forward to the next time.
Thank you for having me.
Take care. Chris Christie's losing supporters and money in his possible bid to become president. That and so much more when we continue. Let's turn political right here on MidPoint.